at stress and disease. Now, I told you last week that we will take a peek at this aspect of stress. Now, as people holding dear to the message of health, I want to let you understand that health, if not sacredly guarded, can be undone by the stressors that you are faced with every day and can impact on significant disease processes and conditions in you. So the first thing I've done is to give you an idea of the areas of the body that we're going to be touching that are affected by stress. Of course, the first one you see way up there is the brain. And you remember I mentioned to you something about Alzheimer's last time. And of course, it's a neurological disease, so it is in your brain. The next area we're going to look at is the muscles and joints. We're not going to touch them much, but you can also get stress in those areas resulting in certain conditions. Of course, the heart, and it is the heart diseases that are responsible for the most deaths in the Western society, amazingly. Of course, we can also look at, well, touch the stomach slightly, and of course the pancreas as relates to diabetes. We're also going to take a little look at, well, might not get too much of that, the reproductive system and the intestines. But let us just begin. Now, problems related to our heart, health problem related to stress, first is heart disease. Now, there are several diseases that are referred to as heart disease. Coronary heart disease, there is, of course, infarction. There are several of them, almost 20 of them that we could outline for you. As a matter of fact, what I should do is make a switch here just to give you a sense of how many diseases can result from stress as it relates to the heart. I'll just show you this one fairly quickly. All right, since I'm not picking it up in a hurry, it might be in documents, I look at the desktop. Let's continue here so we don't lose time unnecessarily. Okay, so as it relates to the heart though, there's a risk of high blood pressure and these other heart problems. And it's amazing how stress can cause your pressure or a person to develop high blood pressure. Of course, high blood pressure now is really not so much at 140/90, even though that is way up. But once you get past 120/80, as far as the pressure is concerned, you could begin to travel in some dangerous waters. 130/80 even could be a little ugly. So that when you begin to get 140/90, that is off the charts as far as the especially epidemiologists are concerned. So what one wants to do is to keep their blood pressure down to 120/80 and below, which is the ideal for the functioning of the heart. Now this, as you get older, you will know that that becomes a bigger challenge because the vascular system or the veins and the arteries can become a little more stiff. And therefore, then there's increased pressure in those areas pushing your blood pressure up. But certainly, you want to pay attention to your heart because there's so many diseases associated with the heart. And like I said, in the Western society, heart disease, which are about 20 different diseases, are considered to be the number one killer, particularly in the United States. Now, stress can, like I said just now, directly increase heart rate and blood flow. Once the elasticity of the veins and the arteries is lost, you'll find that that kind of pressure will increase. And of course, there are for other reasons that you will find your pressure increasing. But one of the things I want to stress as it relates to heart disease is cholesterol and triglycerides. And we all know we're talking about fats basically in the blood. So that as far as you're concerned, once you have an elevated level of triglycerides in your blood, which really, of course, the cholesterol is best suited for the muscles, but if you get it in your blood, you're going to tend to find that your heart conditions can worsen. And that is why medical people pay so much attention to triglyceride levels. So that as you go to your, a matter of fact, I want to suggest to us who might not be doing it, on an annual basis, you should try to get a blood analysis. In that blood analysis, you will have things with your kidney function, will be seeing your heart condition, we've seen which will have the LDL and the HDL lipoproteins, your triglycerides, and several other factors that give you a good sense of the state of your blood chemistry, to use that word. Of course, that does not mean that that tells you everything, because there are other things that you would need to have assessed to give you a sense of your real health. Asthma is another problem that stress can exacerbate. You know, we always only think of asthma in relation to things that you eat. On average, many people think so, or some people experience, for example, if there's a person with, let's say, a strong perfume and they're asthmatics, it can trigger their asthma. And therefore, asthmatics need to be aware of these problems, but also of the fact that stress can worsen asthma. You know, stress is one of those things that affect almost every single system in the body. And one needs to be very conscious of things or the stressors that you are impacted with and how, of course, you react. Now, bullet 2 is an interesting one, which suggests that appearance chronic stress can worsen asthma in children. Amazing. How can appearance chronic stress worsen asthma in children? Of course, there's the instance of appearing under stress. Carrying a child, for example, can really predispose that child to several conditions as well. And even a child very young who might have been asthmatic because of the pressures on the parent and then not dealing with the child adequately can really also impact the child, because if a person is under stress, they are not going to be able to deal with the little children as they ought to. And if that child has asthma, it can be affected unduly. Obesity, this goes without saying actually. And it's interesting that while we generally are a fairly small people in this congregation, obesity or excess fat, especially in the belly region. You know, you heard Dr. Douglas constantly talking about belly fat and the kind of problem that it poses for persons. And it says here that excess fat in the belly poses greater health risks than fat on the legs or hips, because of how it impacts in actual fat. Because of the fat itself is a problem, and when located in that region, it really creates that kind of unnecessary problem. Now, unfortunately, that is just where people with high stress seem to put on fat. When people are really stressed out, they begin eat, some people, sorry, they eat incessantly, and as a result, they begin to fatten up, especially around the area of the tummy, which really is a serious challenge. And then this hormone, cortisol, this is a dangerous, a hormone in actual fact, I should say, that can cause high stress levels. It is a stress hormone, as it's called. And therefore, then, if you have high levels of that hormone, it can impact your stress level. As well as, like I said, it increases the amount of fat that is deposited in the abdomen as well. So that stress triggers a variety of situations causing real problems. And you know what we're told? We're told that most people who see doctors are not really physiologically ill, you know, that is in the body. At the level of the mind, the level in which stress really gets to them. And one set of researchers say that if you can really get people to understand that stress is a mind thing, you might be able to cure lots of the diseases in the body. They talk about cancer as well, inducing stress. So that what I'm suggesting here this evening is that we need to understand the stressors that we are exposed to, look at them carefully, and seek to avoid them or have them reduced altogether. Because they are not any good for us when we are constantly, through chronic situations, kept under stress. Now, also, well, let me just go to the other section. Diabetes, one that I'm very familiar with. And like I said to you standing back, you know, when my son died quite a few years ago now, 11 years or thereabout, I was diagnosed with this condition. And I used to, of course, think that I was fairly strong, I was a good walker, I was eating fairly healthily. But like I was told by our good doctor, the shock of that sudden death seemed to have put everything out of whack within me. And I speak now experientially. My nervous system had picked it up to the extent that I would be just standing up here, looking cool and calm, but my stomach was just churning like a milk churn, just going. My whole body inside was just, you know, and that seemed to have contributed to my condition. So what I'm suggesting is persons can be put under stress and several conditions can develop, and diabetes is one of them. And it says here that it increases the likelihood of bad behaviors. And by behavior, I'm talking about excessive eating. Now, you know, people talk about diabetes and sugar, but we prefer to say high carbohydrate intake. Not only sugar, but starches. And what we preach here from this congregation is that we should be very aware of our carbohydrate intake, especially the refined aspect. We are always encouraged to look at the carbohydrate intake that, of course, deals with what we call the natural or the ground food situation, which releases the sugars or the breakdown sugar more slowly because of the high fiber content in fruits and those type of things. So that is what is encouraged rather than the sweet breads and those things, which can be taken once in a while, once a week or whatever, but you don't do those things every day. And you know some of the things that really have sugar in it, a lot of people don't realize. You see these fruit juices? They may not at all. If you know how to evaluate a fruit juice by going to its content, you will see in the fruit juice, first, water. Immediately after water, you see sugar. That tells you the level of sugar in a particular food. Because the further down sugar is on the listing, it means that it's not very high in sugar. But the higher up it is on that contents listing, tells you that sugar is big in that matter. So that we need to learn to read labels. And I want to emphasize that. Reading labels are very important for your own health. Bread, for example, I'm talking about especially commercially manufactured bread. You know, one of the things I muse on is something we call here in the Caribbean, certainly in Barbados, salt bread. Now, salt bread ain't got salt compared to sugar, you know. There's so much more sugar in these breads than salt. And if you look at the so-called and what you call sandwich bread that we use, you will see that something that has sugar in it, something got honey, and all of that really is sweetened stuff that really we can really do without. So the message today is what we have been presenting all the time. Natural. Live as natural and get as much whole foods whole as we can. Your beans, your grains, your vegetables, all those things are critical. But you know what our problem is? You know, we taught young people fast food. Well, listen, we like fast things as well. We go and take up a bread and that fast. But to even boil a potato, which is much better, that take a little too long. So you are encouraged to look at the complex carbohydrates, which release the sugars much slowly, reduce spiking of the blood sugar, and allow it to take a more, a plateau kind of a situation rather than too spiked. Of course, it raises the glucose level with people with type 2 diabetes. So Sister Jenny's and people like me and so on, you know, we got to be conscious of that particular kind of activity because we don't want our blood sugar spiking too sudden because of the problems that it can cause. Headaches. This is a very interesting one. You know, I add to headache, I add influenza and flu. You know what is being shown? Of course, we know that influenza and the common cold are triggered by viruses or caused by viruses. But you know what is being shown as well? It is shown that you can put stress on your immune system and therefore then cause your immune system to become depressed. That is the stress that depresses your immune system, and the common cold and influenza can then really come in on the ground as an attack. And once you are having if you are having continuous, you know, some people every now and again see a cold. They got a cold so often. They should be an alert because it tells the story your immune system is under pressure. Stress might well be wreaking havoc on your immune system, and as a result, because it becomes depressed, the common cold or even influenza can come in and attack because, of course, there are viruses. Then, of course, tension headaches and migraine. Tension headaches, very closely related to the natural fact. There are some people, when they have a headache, they just can't open the eyes. We're talking about migraines because they're light sensitive. So that the symptoms of migraine include pounding headache. Really pounding, like somebody pounding in your head pounding. Then you have nausea. Vomiting as well will occur. And one of the telltale signs is light sensitivity. You know, people with migraines very often have to be in dark environments in order to get, of course, you have medication that would help to soothe and be helpful. But on average, light affects people with migraine headaches. And they tend to, and sometimes I've known a couple of persons who at work, I remembered it, for 2 weeks, this person was wrecked with this thing called migraine headache. And of course, not only stress, people sometimes eat nuts, and it can trigger a migraine as well. So people need to be aware of those triggers that can create these problems for them, impacting their health unnecessarily. And when your health is impacted, you can't give full scope to God and His Word. Because the more sick you are, the less able are you to focus, especially on spiritual things. Because it takes a clear mind to grasp deep things in the spiritual realm. Depression and anxiety. We got so much depression in this world now that it is frightening. Almost everybody there will tell me, I feel so depressed. Depression, and anxiety, two closely related conditions. And chronic stress, therefore, then, is connected with higher rates of depression and anxiety. Of course, Anxiety can come from a lot of things. For example, people preparing for exams can become very anxious of how they're going to perform. And sometimes it really affects them negatively. Of course, we need a little stress course, but the good kind that will spur you on, to really reach up to a certain level. But once you get levels beyond a certain level, you'll put yourself in trouble because it's going to probably, on that continuum, on that line, it can lead eventually to depression, and you might have to see a professional for help, a person that might be dealing in the area of psychiatry. Because if you allow chronic stress to develop and continue, it can reach that level. Of course, let me say, yes, it can reach that particular level where you might have to have professional help. And like I said sometime back, we encourage people every year to go and seek medical attention for the physiology, for their body. But we don't usually encourage people to consider their mental health. And lots of people are suffering ill mental health. They will have outbursts of anger. And it tells a story sometimes when you see these things. We can't always look for what you call a physical situation. Very often that person's mental health is like, I would say, out of whack a little bit and needs attention. It doesn't mean that they are mad. No, it doesn't mean that. It means that they might having some imbalances. For example, you can have some chemical imbalances, which we're going to look at a little bit with Alzheimer's as well. Some chemical imbalances can affect you and cause you to behave, and something you want to know about, why behaving so though? I don't want to behave that way. But sometimes that can really happen. People who had stress related to their jobs, like demanding work with few rewards, had an 80% higher risk of developing depression within a few years than people with lower stress. You can imagine that? People, therefore, then, who are under pressure, who have some, listen, some of the jobs that are said to be most demanding are things like policeman's job, things like the doctor's job, things like, I'm talking about a descending scale. Teachers are a little lower down the line, about 6 or 7. Also, I'll tell you why they said that, I'll show you why they said that. People like working inside the airline, so the airport industry, guys who are, what do you call them again, bring the aircraft? Air traffic controllers are at least near number 1. I know the reason for that particular rating. Nurses too, but they are not as high up there. The rating they give is that the more responsible you are for more lives, tend to put stress pressure on you. So they say that these guys, because you might find aircrafts coming through, 300 people on it, and sometimes because of the intensity they found, and this is research, so I put up my height, they find that these guys have a serious responsibility, because if an aircraft comes down because of a failure on their part, so many people will die. Of course, over time, the nurses, the doctors, if they're not astute, can be responsible for people demitting this life. Teachers, for example, have a stress, of course, associated with the jungle life now that occurs in schools, as they are calling it. Because students nowadays are not students before, who tend to be a little more, compliant. Thank you for a good word. But even now, you heard during the week that the concern is not only students, girls now are taking the lead in this thing. And once you see women, females taking over the lead in a negative role, it means that society is at the popping level. Because women do not do that on average. That is a man behavior. So they say once you see women involved in violent activities, and now I had social media and things sent to me showing that there are these women now walking about with guns. You know, they have on their whatever, but guns. And the fellas have knives, these long knives, you know, strapped around them. And they say once you see women in that behavior, society is about to collapse. And more women are involved in some very bad behaviors, which it wasn't several years ago. So it's something that we need to keep our eyes on, and therefore, having our children, we need to really encourage them in actual fact. The GI problems, the gastrointestinal problems, of course, the gastrointestinal tract, you know, you will see it run from the mouth to the anus, all that area. But one of the things that people, is a common expression is that stress causes ulcers. Stress causing ulcers. But you know, I think you heard Dr. Duglin, and this was research done in 1962, remember, by, eventually remember having studied it, by a young Australian doctor, which suggests that what was being blamed for ulcers is not really true. But there's a little bacteria called Helicobacter pylori that really is the key in this particular matter. So that while stress does not cause ulcers, certainly it can make them worse. So watch what's happening. It might not be the cause, but it can worsen the situation. Now, another thing that you need to be aware of, people talk about acid reflux. You see that acid reflux? There's a serious association with cancer, especially the stomach, and acid reflux. So one needs to be very aware that if you are having constant acid reflux, it is not a natural thing. It's not natural at all. Because it means it is going against the spirituality, anti-spirituality, and that is the condition of the stomach is, as it were, pushing back what is the kind, as we would say, up through the esophagus and causing that burning that we refer to as acid reflux. So that we need to be very careful then, the things that we eat do not affect the gastrointestinal tract and lining, especially in the stomach region, where this burning can occur. And then the other one, IBS. Stress also imparts irritable bowel syndrome, which have symptoms like diarrhea, constipation, and abdominal cramps. And you know what it said? This is a very especially seen in women, IBS. Women seem to have a higher level of prevalence of it, instance rather, than men on average. So that our women need to be very conscious also. Of course, all of us need to be conscious of that condition that is found, of course, in the GI tract. Alzheimer's. Of course, I am not the most qualified by any stretch to speak to these, but I'm just trying to stir up your mind to give a sense of, understanding. The researchers say that Alzheimer's causes nerve cell death and tissue loss throughout the entire brain. Nerve cell death and tissue loss. Remember last week I talked about the neurons and so on, and how in actual fact the brain cells can actually die and don't replicate or not add no new ones, and as a result, because of that lack of the neurons, you find therefore then that things that wouldn't happen normally can happen, because the connection between the neurons and so on being lost, you get this situation. Now, as the diseases worsen, the brain can shrink. The brain tissues can shrink, and the area will contain more fluid now than tissue, and that is a problem. As a result, the damage harms memory, speech, and comprehension. And there's some very early signs of Alzheimer's. In early Alzheimer's disease, long-term memory usually is good. I'm told that. People, there's the early stages, remember, called when you get a way out stage, you don't remember nothing, you don't remember who you are. But in the early stages, how it develops, as it were, close to dementia, you find that people can remember things from 1920. But then they have difficulty remembering things that were done not too long ago. because the short-term memory becomes sketchy, and it tends to repeat the same question over and over. And that is a good indicator of something is going out. Where you're talking to the person, and then they ask you over, and you find they ask you over again. It's not just a little lapse you have. I remember I asked you, No. But you're asking the same question very seriously over many times. They say that is one of the first indicators for sure, one of them, not the only one of them, that person is really beginning to have cognitive decline, and therefore then there should be really help. Because, as I say here, in one of the things, that if you are able to recognize it early, you might be able to get help for those persons. But going further, there's the disruption of speech. People struggle to remember common words. A word that you would be doing normally. You find you can't remember that word. And by the way, I'm told that really this decline can be seen, well, I don't know if it's still so, but this is a research I read, very early, that is early 60s. I don't know if it's gone on further by now because everything is really getting out of whack. But just people in their early 60s begin to have this difficulty forgetting more than memory lapses, asking questions over and over, and therefore then for persons who are attentive and good caregivers, it is a sign that they should not just sit down on with their family, but should seek some help in actual fact. Then there's the confusion and behavior change. So that people, now, this is interesting, because sometimes we say that we have an expression in Barbados where your mind, or your memory was lapsed to the extent that you know this place, your head turned. We use that term in Barbados. My head just get turned. That is not the same thing at all. These people with early or with Alzheimer's are confused. They will come into this building that they know all their years, and somehow they just can't get it on their radar. It confuses them. They go into their own district, and they can't find their home, or they find difficulty. And some of the other things as well are the mood swings. And these are things I especially want to mention Alzheimer's because it's very big on the horizon right now. Mood swings, lapses in judgment, poor hygiene. You see this one, poor hygiene? That is a very serious indicator. There are some people who are very fussy with how they are. Some women, let's use a woman for example, men as well too. But a woman will be very proper and prim and her hair nice. And then after a time, you see this woman like a ragged tiger, as it were. And one of the things is, bathing is not high on priority list because they don't see it, they don't understand it, and they go for bathing. I had an old headmaster at one school. I was told that he was seen in Bridgetown in his pajamas. This man was so prim and proper. Once you see him in Bridgetown pajamas, things are out to see. And yes, truly, he was diagnosed with Alzheimer's badly, and he died with it not even knowing himself. So that this Alzheimer's, like I think Dr. Douglas said, some people say they'd rather have cancer than Alzheimer's. Because with cancer, you're still rational to a good extent. But with Alzheimer's, when it has really gone to its max, let me tell you something. You are a pitiful sight. Don't know yourself, don't know your family. You can do things that you will never do. And probably you can play with that which comes from the body, and you don't see a problem with it at all, quite easily. So that's why people say, I would rather have one of those other diseases than this thing called Alzheimer's, because it is taken over so heavily and creating so much problems. But little comfort is given here early in Alzheimer's, I'm told, that symptoms could be caused by a thyroid imbalance, and that is treatable very early. If it is picked up because of the hormone, the thyroid imbalance, you might be able to do something, that is starting treatment very early. And just recently, for some of you on WhatsApp, you will see that there was a medical doctor who was able to get some help for her husband, who was a brilliant man. And suddenly, he was struck with this debilitating disease, I will call it. But she was able to get some reversal for him by some things that she did. And then some of the other stress problems, accelerated aging. And if you look at the last bullet, it says down here, stress seems to accelerate aging about 9 to 17 additional years. Wow. So that people that on due stress at 60 can look like nearly 80. You can imagine that? And all because of the pressure, the stress that they might well be under. And just let me stay with that particular bullet. You can always look at others. Then premature death itself. It says that, caregivers really are exposed to some very serious health, especially if you are giving care to, let's say, a husband who might be suffering with Alzheimer's or some other condition. Very often caregivers die and leave the people who they're giving care to. And it's because they say that the pressure that they take on themselves, and if they don't die, they can begin to age significantly because they're taking the person's pressure on themselves and their own pressure and creating the problems. So that is why people are encouraged to get professional aid for people who are really in a certain situation. Because if you are not able or you're not trained to help in a specific way, you can really jeopardize your own health, the stress that can really come on you. And it says that it's found that caregivers had a 63% higher rate of death than persons their age who were not caregivers. Wow, that is very high incidence there, isn't it? 63% compared with persons who are not caregivers. Showing, therefore, then, believers, that stress is no respect of persons if you allow it to take you out. But we can do much because we have assurances from the Word of God. Cast your burdens upon the Lord, and He will sustain you. That is a warm promise that we can keep before our eyes. And of course, the one that Christ gave in Matthew chapter 28, 11, 28 to 30. Come unto me, all you that labor and are heavy burdened. And stress is a heavy burden. And if we would cast these things upon Christ, we can be relieved much better than we might be doing at present. Thank you. God bless. I believe that we want to call upon the music people to just have a sound for transition to Brother Oswald's section. So those who are doing the music or whoever can come.